There's even a point in this movie where someone who is trying to white knight for Emma Stone's character, who's saying like, no, man, this is a guy saying this, women are superior. And the Billie Jean King immediately turns around and goes, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Yes.
That is not what I'm saying.
Right in the middle of a paparazzi raid.
Exactly. I'm just saying we can be equal. We can just do the same thing.
It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Hanging out with Dominic Guanzon, who saw Battle of the Sexes this weekend. The brand new Valerie Faris and Jonathan Dayton directed movie. These are the two actors. They're teaming up. They're husband and wife. They're teaming up now for the third. They directed Little Miss Sunshine, and they directed Ruby Sparks. So now they are back for their third film. Dominic, good to have you with me as always. Thank you for filming tonight as well. So we're talking Battle of the Sexes, my friend. How much did you know about this going into it?
Jack Squat.
Indeed.
That's absolutely nothing.
I know.
Did you ask your parents, like, or did you ask your mom, like, hey, did you know anything about this growing up or anything?
I didn't know, not at all. Because first off, I guess we should go into kind of the story about it, because I still feel that this is a little bit of an under the radar film. Not many people know about it. Battle of the Sexes concerns a tennis player named Billie Jean King. Focuses in the 1970s. So again, like American Made, we are talking about the 70s. This show pretty much. The film concerns Billie Jean King, a hugely talented tennis player, played in the 1970s, broke away from the United States Lawn and Tennis Association.
That's about right.
Yeah, so broke away from that in the late 70s to kind of go off and join this all-women's tennis circuit that she made. Was sponsored actually by Philip Morris's Virginia Slim cigarettes, which I thought was very interesting as well. So the film revolves around her going off and doing her own thing with this women's circuit of tennis. She winds up getting challenged by Bobby Riggs, a veteran tennis prodigy played by Steve Carell, who's been retired for a few years but comes back. He's considerably older than Billie Jean King, who is in like her, would they ever say in like her late 20s, early 30s in this movie?
No, she's like 26, 27.
26?
She's in her prime.
I was going to say, because Bobby Riggs is like 50, mid.
He's retired. He was retired yes. by the events of the film.
Mid-50s. So the film focuses on the King versus Riggs match in 1973, which was dubbed Battle of the Sexes because it pitted a young woman against an older man in tennis, and a big deal was made about that gender gap, to the age gap, the gender gap. A lot of people were going off of Bobby Riggs' pretty gratuitous display of publicity. He kind of became a wrestler in this sort of sense. He was very brash in the fact that this was not only about a victory for him if he won, but this was also about sort of like the preservation of the male athlete, the masculine attitude. So there's a lot at stake in this battle, more so than a winner or loser combination. Again, Billie Jean King is played by the wonderful Emma Stone, an actor of tremendous conviction. It was only a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about Jennifer Lawrence, who is 27. Emma Stone is 28. These are two of the most talented women of our time right now in film, and they are so good in this movie. Dominic, what did you think overall, before we dive into Carell and a lot of the supporting performances here, what did you think of Stone in Battle of the Sexes?
Stone, I think this is one of her finest performances in her career. Not that I'm a great, Emma Stone, I've gone through her whole library or anything, but what I've seen her in, La La Land and other films that I'm failing to remember right now, this is absolutely one of her best, because she's handed an incredible character in the form of Billie Jean King. And honestly, the script here is so good, and the characters are so fully developed, which I'm straying from Emma Stone. But Emma Stone actually brings that character truly to life, to use an old cliche, because she captures kind of the conflict both inside and outside, because there's a huge kind of dodged by the marketing, but there's a huge LGBT undertone in this movie. Not even undertone. It's like half the movie.
No, I mean, the only reason we could call it an undertone is because the marketing, I think, grossly misrepresented and shortchanged this. And I mean, it was pretty egregious. I couldn't believe that. The first hour of the movie is devoted to King's sort of developing relationship with a California hairdresser named Marilyn, played by Andrea Riseborough, and who's really good in this movie too. Very understated performance. But a lot of the movie is focused on her relationship with this woman. And King is a married woman too. She's married to her husband, who's very supportive. Indeed, he's played by who's he played by in this movie? I'm totally blanking on the name of who plays him.
Austin Stowell.
Austin Stowell, okay, because his name in the movie is Larry King, which really threw me off. But he could have went by Lawrence. But anyway, that's a big subtext. The lesbian undertones in this movie or the lesbian plot in this movie is very big, and and I think it was grossly misrepresented in the trailer. And I mean, I haven't seen. Ironically, it was a Jennifer Lawrence movie. I haven't seen a misrepresented trailer for this movie like that. That ignored a plot point so so obviously, or just masked what the movie was really about, since the movie Joy with Jennifer Lawrence. Seriously. I mean, it was really surprising, because when I'm watching this, I'm thinking okay, this might be a minor thing, but then it starts taking over half the movie, and then it's which is fine, it's a good plot, but it's man, I did not expect this going into it. Not that I know anything about Billie Jean King at all, but still.
I wish I could go into the heads of the marketing department and whoever called the shots there, because it's it sucks to say. I'm only inferring, but maybe it's because this movie had so much writing on it as a feminist film, they couldn't handle the LGBT
subplot too. Yeah, I mean, they didn't want to say okay, you can have one, but you can't have both. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which is really
too much
sad.
For the public to handle.
12 years since Brokeback Mountain came out, and seriously, I mean, that's really.
And again, I'm only inferring that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's appalling in its own right too. But yeah, Emma Stone is good. You know that as of now, and I just found this out. As of now, Emma Stone has less than 25 film credits.
Seriously?
Less than 25 film credits.
No,
her first film was Superbad in 2007.
Oh my God.
That was her first movie.
That's a good movie.
Great start.
I mean, she did TV work a little bit here and there, but that was her first role. And then just a couple years later, 3 years later, she was in Easy A, which really, I would say, is the one that really got her to a height.
She's got a great track record for movies.
I mean, maybe you could argue Zombieland a year before was a good platform for her too, but I would say Easy A did a lot. I would say Easy A is a great movie.
Different markets.
Definitely different markets. Then she was also in, which I never saw, Crazy Stupid Love. In The Help, she was in The Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, and I'm looking through her filmography. The only obviously bad thing that she's done, that she's acted in, we're not talking voice roles, for which she's done a couple. Aside from it, again, I'm gonna exclude movie 43 because it's only a brief thing that she's in.
She was a victim in that movie.
She was a victim.
Honestly,
the worst thing that she did was Aloha. That was the worst thing that she did. The Cameron Crowe movie, that she was actually supposed to be playing a role that was for an Asian actress. That was probably the worst thing that she's done. But she's worked with Woody Allen in Magic in the Moonlight and Irrational Man, which are, I think, two of Woody Allen's best movies since 2000. I think those are, Magic in the Moonlight especially, wonderful Woody Allen movie. She's been in La La Land, obviously, and she's been in quite a bit. Like I said, less than 25 roles, and she hits another one out of the park with Battle of the Sexes. Don't be surprised. It might seem like a little bit of a long shot. Don't be surprised if she gets an Oscar nomination second year in a row.
This is going to get a 4-year consideration, and I think she's going to get nominated.
I think so too.
Possibly. Who's up against her so far?
I mean, it's a little bit hard to tell. It's a little bit hard to tell.
It's an awesome movie, mostly because I wasn't expecting truly anything. As you said, I had no idea this was an event that took place. There was an actual tennis match called Sexes that was watched, according to sources, 90 million people worldwide, 50 million in the U.S. and 90 million people worldwide. It was huge and a landmark moment for women's tennis, absolutely no doubt, and kind of a landmark cultural moment for just the women's liberation movement as a whole.
Yes,
which they make a point of portraying, and just the characters are really fully developed here, which I love. The conflict is 3-dimensional. There's hardly anyone here who's truly a 1-dimensional bad person except or bad, badly portrayed person who, except what's his name, Jack Kramer in the film.
Jack Kramer, Bill Pullman's character.
Bill Pullman's character. There
Yes,
we go.
indeed.
Who I can never not see as the president of the United States. Sorry.
Big time. I know. Yep, I know what you're talking about. So anyway, getting back to this though, what did you think of Steve Carell in Battle of the Sexes, Dom?
I was just about to say the person who comes next on the list in terms of just awesome characters is, of course, Steve Carell, her kind of equal or her opponent in the movie. And Steve Carell, again, as I said, fully dimensional, fully realized character, because he could have so easily been just a complete male chauvinist pig, a self-proclaimed male chauvinist pig in the movie. But as the movie actually digs deeper into his life and his actions, he's not. I think he plays it up. You actually brought it up. He's almost like playing it up as a wrestler in the professional wrestling. And this whole event honestly felt like a WrestleMania match. If anyone has ever seen that or heard of that, it's crazy. When they actually get to the tennis match between Carell and Stone, they're carrying them on Egyptian, what do you call it, thrones?
Thrones, yeah.
Steve Carell comes in on a rickshaw with like scantily clad models. People are going crazy. They're holding up signs.
I was actually crossing my fingers that Billie Jean King was just going to walk out there with a racket. I was crossing my fingers because that would have been so her. Now, the thing that I failed to mention too about Emma Stone, because I didn't really give my thoughts on it, but I mean, it's a great performance. But the thing I failed to mention too is that Emma Stone really carries a weight here that's really interesting. She kind of plays a role like a duality. Like she's got a social awkwardness, but she's also got like a fierce confidence. And that's different.
It's that conflict between her and the game, and then her and her husband and her quote unquote side show, which is Marilyn in the movie. So she's got like three loves in this movie, which is her husband, Marilyn, her lesbian lover, and then the game of tennis itself. When she's always
triumphs both.
She's just torn between them at points. Although, of course, tennis always comes through as we'll quickly learn.
She's like me with the movies and my mother and father. There you have it.
Go.
And we are talking about Battle of the Sexes, the brand new Valerie Faris, Jonathan Dayton film, the directors of Little Miss Sunshine and Ruby Sparks. Dominic, have you seen either of those movies?
I'm sorry, what was the first movie?
Little Miss Sunshine.
Little Miss Sunshine, yeah. So I've seen that. Had not seen Ruby Sparks. Did that also have Steve Carell in it?
Yeah, Little Miss Sunshine had Steve Carell.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yes, Little Miss Sunshine had Steve Carell. I love Little Miss Sunshine. I'll be very honest with you. I love Little Miss Sunshine. Such a good movie. I remember I rented it off pay-per-view. My mother and I watched it when it first came out when I was about 11. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. And the thing I love about the movie that much too is like all those characters in that movie, Alan Arkin, Abigail Breslin, Paul Dano, Greg Kinnear.
Paul Dano, that was the first Paul Dano
yes, and he was so good, and he's got less than like maybe 3 pages of dialogue. Toni Collette. I mean, the thing that I love about that movie so much is that on any given day, I can feel like any of those characters.
Yeah.
That's the thing I like about that movie.
That's how relatable they are?
That's how relatable. Like, each one of them is like a distinct personality trait of people. And I love it. I think that movie is so good. I wish it was talked about more, Little Miss Sunshine. That's the bad thing, though, with Ferris and Dayton. I think they made their best movie first. Not that... Ruby Sparks is good, too. That's got Paul Dano, too. And the woman who was in The Big Sick. She was in that as well, Zoe Kazan. She was in that as well. But that she plays Ruby Sparks, plays the titular character. So we're going into Battle of the Sexes, though. I'm just going to come clean right now and say it. It's a movie based on, really based on performances.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The strength of the performances. And that's great because the performances are really good. Another big standout here besides Stone and Carell is Sarah Silverman. Yeah. Who plays Gladys, who plays the manager of the Virginia Slim circuit of tennis.
Strong supporting role, plays it very Sarah Silverman.
I love Sarah Silverman, I'll tell you right now.
I know you do.
As a comedian, as an actress, I mean, I love to. She came out and opened her new Netflix special. By laughing into the mic and saying, I can hear my sister laugh. She's dead, you know, and I love it. Sarah Silverman's got such a unique wit, and I love people, even if I don't always find them funny, I like that people that have unique wits, and like her, Larry David, there's a lot of people I like that have very unique styles of comedy, and she's one of them, and it comes through here. She
doesn't have a lot of time, too, either. You think this is going to be like a huge ensemble cast because there's a lot of girls in that tournament circuit they set up for themselves?
Yes.
But they just, by the second half, by the third act for sure, but in the second act, they start to fade away to make room for Carell and Stone.
They're pretty faceless. I'd go as far as to say they're pretty faceless in this movie. I mean, you don't really get a ton of time with them, though, which is a little bit disappointing, but also King is such a big, complex character. Her relationships within her life are complex. Her feelings on Bobby Riggs are very complex,
Riggs
too.
himself is
Riggs
extremely
himself.
complex.
Yeah, so there's a lot. It would almost be a disservice to the movie if it focused too much on King's colleagues in tennis, tennis colleagues.
It's kind of unneeded.
And I was going to say, too, I mentioned this in my review. Again, you can read it at stevethemovieman.proboards.com. I said that, like, just as eye-catching as the film's performances are, it's like 1970s-centric aesthetics. And it's playing different but still familiar beats to American Made, which we talked about last hour. There's a lot of, very, light, kind of washed colors, you know what I mean, in this movie. It's very almost muted in a way. It's got a very distinct, almost grainy color palette, too, But what comes through, really, what cuts through a lot of it is really the dialogue, which the dialogue exchange between men and women, which is sadly, and this is one of the big points of the movie, not much different than the kind of rhetoric you hear nowadays. In terms of addressing the gender gap, gender inequality, however you may feel about that, a lot of things in this movie still ring true today. And that's going back to, you and I had a long discussion, and I love it. It still stands as probably one of my favorite discussions on Sleepless, with Detroit. Detroit, the Catherine Bigelow film. And we talked extensively about that. And I said the saddest thing about Detroit is that it should be a time capsule movie. It should be a movie that we look at and say, like Lincoln, and like 12 Years a Slave. Like, how could that happen? Why did it happen? What have we learned from there? Detroit is still relevant. It's as relevant as ever. Battle of the Sexes, too. The gender dynamics in this movie, the gender politics in this movie, the portrayal of the lesbian relationship at its core, it's also relevant and it's also timely.
You think on a certain level, it's kind of been sanded off, but a lot of it's still there. What I especially appreciate about this movie is that it's not. It actually doesn't feel very heavy-handed, honestly.
Not at all.
Especially, for us Chicagolanders, right? It doesn't feel that very heavy-handed. There's even a point in this movie where someone who is trying to white knight for Emma Stone's character, who's saying, like, no, man, this is a guy saying this, women are superior. And the Billie Jean King immediately turns around and goes, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Yes.
That is not what I'm saying.
Right in the middle of a paparazzi
Exactly.
raid.
I'm just saying we can be equal. We can just do the same thing.
But that scene is also so realistically handled that it downplays its own its alleged heavy-handedness. Because that scene is not heavy-handed at all. That scene is very...
It's so quick.
That scene is not only quick, you can be quick and heavy-handed, but it's not only quick, but it's appropriate and it's smooth. It doesn't feel like the movie. The problem with heavy-handedness too, and this is how you can point it out, and this is why I criticize it in movies like Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. Religious movies, like I'm going to talk about later in the hour, A Question of Faith, are very guilty of this too. If the movie has to stop in order for you to deliver a monologue accompanied by orchestration, then it's heavy-handed. Battle of the Sexes doesn't stop. It keeps going while that scene plays. And it's so quick that even if you say, okay, maybe the scene did stop because Emma Stone does physically stop to address the comment, it's still so quick enough that it downplays its own heavy-handedness.
There's so much forward momentum in so many scenes of this movie.
That it prevents itself from doing that. And again, you get movies like that. Like I said, a lot of Christian films do this. I'm sorry, that's what they do. They're very sentimentalized. And they have to stop so they can proselytize. And that's, if you have to stop the narrative to deliver a monologue about so-and-so, that's what kills it, and that's what kills the credibility. Because then it doesn't become a movie about characters, it doesn't become a movie about events, it becomes a movie about ideology, it becomes a movie about hammering morals, and doing so with an approach that really shows that, like, hey, you probably just should, the director or writer probably just should have rented out an auditorium for 2 hours.
Look, the vessel in how you deliver a message, there's obviously not, people have been delivering messages in movies ever since it began, the medium began, but the vessel in which you deliver said message is so incredibly important as well. People still talk about Birth of a Nation as a legitimately well-made film.
We're talking about the early 1900s movie.
Yeah, the early 1900s, the one with a very, very bad white supremacist undertones or overtones, honestly. But still, even that has people. You gotta admit, as cinema enthusiasts, it's shot very well. It's very innovative for its time.
Oh no, it is. I mean, it's up there. I'll tell you right now. For that time period, for like the first, like from 1900 to like 1950, it's up there in the top 10 most like influential and cinematic movies. I mean, it's on the same list as Citizen Kane in that respect. Yeah, hate the subject matter. It's a contemptible movie in a lot of regards, but like the techniques are there. The techniques are there, and I mean, it's something that you can't lose, especially in the history of cinema.
And Battle of the Sexes, at its core, it's still a sports movie. Right?
Oh yes, no, it absolutely is. Those final 25 minutes are unmistakable.
And we've seen, not even as, I mean, I'm not even a huge sports fan that much, but we've seen a lot of sports movies, right? And there's a lot of classic sports movie moments. It still felt incredibly fresh, and I was still getting hyped up to the final match, the actual Battle of the Sexes, coming up to it. Like, I was surprised, like in the 10 minutes before the match begins, where there's some classic locker room stuff and a lot of final words before the match, and even then, like, I'm getting hyped for this. I want to see how this goes down. This feels like a WrestleMania match.
No, and it's true. I'll tell you, like, you know what? I'll be honest with you. That ending, or that like concluding match, because you know it's going to end with the Battle of the Sexes. Like, I would have loved, believe me, the obsession that I have with experimental film made me cross my fingers for the movie to end just as Emma Stone got on the throne and proceeded out. I really wanted to see directed by at the end of that. I was like, oh, come on, don't do it. I was going to say do it, but it wouldn't have worked at all. But I did love the end, quote unquote, battle, if you will. And the thing about it was too is, like, even going into this, not knowing this story, kind of inferring what would happen, but I still didn't know how the battle went. Like, I really didn't.
Same here.
I didn't know how it went. I thought it was good. You know what I mean? But I was like, I was still, you kind of figure how it's going to end, but it's like, I don't know for sure. And
you don't know how it's going to go.
I don't know how it's going to come together, and I think that's a really cool, inclusion, though. But it's a movie that like I said before, is largely made up of the strength of its performances, and Carell and Stone are great together, very, very good. A lot of good, subtle humor too. And I keep forgetting that also Dayton and Faris did not write this movie. This film was written by Simon Beaufoy. They did not write this movie. Beaufoy wrote 127 Hours. He wrote The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. So he's wrote Everest, which I didn't see, but he wrote that one as well. And kind of a diverse palette of movies too. But if you want to get into final ratings on this, I like this movie quite a bit. I think that there's a lot of good in this movie too. Some might say, and I'm fully expected of this too, and I've seen it already critiqued, is that even though the movie's not heavy-handed, but a lot of people say it doesn't go as deep as it maybe should. But I think that its comprehensiveness isn't a deterrent like it might seem. I think the film bites off a perfect amount of what it can chew. It portrays King as a person, King in terms of her three relationships, her husband, her lover, and the love of the game. And I think that it also captures its moral and its inherent timeliness without having this sort of really weighty this weighty approach to itself.
I mean, look, addressing that concern, this isn't a slavery movie, right? It's not like you can't take that much of a heavy-handedness into it. So on a level, it's still and it's a sports movie, right? So it has to have that certain lightheartedness to it, jumpiness to it, keeping it going.
Indeed.
So,
No, I agree. I give the film 3 out of 4 stars. I think it's a very solid movie. Look for good performances by Sarah Silverman, again, who plays the manager of the Virginia Slim Circuit of women's tennis. Look for Bill Pullman, who does a great job at being very contemptible as Jack Kramer, the tennis champion turned sexist sports announcer, as I put it in my review. Alan Cumming as well. And
I forgot about Alan Cumming.
Alan Cumming is in this movie.
He's great.
Too.
The last time I saw him in anything, honestly, was the Flintstones.
Vegas. It was not Viva Rock. We're talking about
the live action movie. So
and it was not Viva Rock Vegas. It was not Viva Rock. We're talking about the first one with Rick Moranis and John Goodman, the good one, No, but anyway, that was a weird era too. I'm surprised you mentioned that too, given your contempt for the Flintstones family.
I'm not. Look, I've seen so much Flintstones content. It doesn't mean I have to like any of it.
Oh, yeah. I just like the vitamins. 3 out of 4 stars for Battle of the Sexes. Think it's a damn fine movie. Don't think it's getting a lot of recognition, too. Also, just to finish off my laundry list of good performances in the film, Andrea Riseborough, too, as Marilyn, the hairdresser who turns into King's lover. Dominic, your rating and at least concluding thoughts on Battle of the Sexes.
This is a story I did not know anything about. So this movie delivering that to me was awesome, and delivering a message in a way that I respect. Really, it is not very heavy-handed. I think it's get its points across in something that I think a lot of people can honestly agree with. And on top of that, fully developed and fleshed out characters, especially Steve Carell's character, who honestly could have just been literally a male chauvinistic pig, but in the end, you just see that, okay, that's just a facade he puts in order to sell the game. And Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs in real life, they became or they stayed friends throughout the whole.
They did.
ordeal.
They were at least a little bit more than acquaintances.
Yeah.
Riggs did pass away.
In
Riggs is dead
1985.
Yes, Riggs did die. King is still alive. She's in her 70s.
Yeah, but they stayed friends up until Bobby Riggs' death.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That's an interesting note too. Final star rating.
Well, actually, I'll give it a joke rating here. I'll give it 68 out of 69 gaps in the front teeth.
Oh, indeed.
Did you notice that they actually, both characters, Stone and Carell,
yes.
had gaps in their front
I
teeth?
know.
But honestly, I give it 4 out of 4 stars. This
Really?
Yeah, seriously, I didn't think I'd come out of this either. But
Wow.
the surprise of this plot, which I literally, as someone who loves history, I didn't know this event happened at all. So it really brought that to light as well. And the dialogue and the characters were so great. To me, there is no weak spot in this movie. There's no weak character. There's no one that brings it down, no weak spot in the fence. And coming out of it, I felt great. And there's so much. Honestly, the LGBT subplot there that the marketing neglected, that almost kind of helped it too, as another layer of surprise that I didn't know about at all.
It's a great plot. It's a great subplot. You heard it here first. Dominic
Yeah.
Guanzon. I think it's the first 4-star movie.
I think so.
I don't think you've given 4 stars to anything before. You've come close. I know you gave Dunkirk. I think you gave Dunkirk 3.5. I remember
Yeah,
that you gave
seriously.
Dunkirk 3.5.
And I love that movie.
Yes. So wow, 4 out of 4 stars from Battle of the Sexes from Dominic. 3 out of 4 stars from me, but not much less positive. You're listening to Sleepless with Steve.